In 1930, a voluntary national program for the collection of crime statistics was initiated by the International Association of Chiefs of Police and the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The resulting annual reports on criminal activity in the United States have become the most popular and comprehensive source for official data on crime and delinquency. In 1974, the National Advisory Commission on Criminal Justice Standards and Goals identified juvenile delinquency as a critical, high-priority national concern. The highest attention must be given to preventing juvenile delinquency, minimizing the involvement of young offenders in the juvenile and criminal justice system, and reintegrating them into the community. The media, especially newspapers and television, continually focus on crimes committed by U.S. youths, especially those crimes of a violent and sensational nature, such as drive-by shootings, school shootings, and gang activities. Today, youths commit delinquent acts ranging from status offenses, such as truancy and curfew violations, to petty crimes of vandalism and breaking and entering, to vicious assaults and even murder. Equally lacking in sensationalism are the database findings that only 7 to 10% of delinquents are chronic and violent offenders, and this hardcore group commits up to 63% of all serious and violent crime. The methods and procedures used to collect and analyze data determine their accuracy and, in turn, the usefulness of the findings. Consequently, most research efforts to measure the amount and kinds of delinquent behavior utilize information collected by law enforcement agencies about known offenders. Conversely, such data are limited in informing us about the offenses and traits of delinquent youths who are not apprehended. Other investigators into juvenile delinquency have implemented sampling strategies in which a relatively small number of known delinquents or other subjects are selected and surveyed on the assumption that they are representative of a much larger population. A measure has validity when it in fact measures what it is supposed to measure. A finding or conclusion is valid if it accurately reflects factual evidence. A measure has reliability when it yields the same results upon repetition of the measuring procedure or replication by other investigators. Validity and reliability are related, and both are enhanced if survey questions are structured so that they can readily be understood by the subjects and elicit informative, straightforward answers. Comparison should be made only between two or more samples, or of a single sample, or of a single sample at different points in time if variables such as age, race, sex, and social class have been controlled or held reasonably constant and similar from group to group from time to time.
Hello, my name is Jasmine Beck, and I'll be doing pages 33 through about 38 on Chapter 2. In this section, we had the two sources of delinquency information, which come from the FBI and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. Also within this section, we talked about, it discussed the FBI Uniform Crime Report, which comes out every year since 1930. Basically, they just measure the extent, fluctuation, distribution, and nature of serious crime in the U.S., and the total volume of serious crime known to the police, and then the activity and coverage of the law enforcement agencies through arrest counts and police employee strength data, which helps them in building new programs and doing more patrols and things like that. Basically, we have the 8 index crimes, or Part 1 crimes, which is number 1, murder and non-negligent manslaughter. The willful or non-negligent killing of another human being by one. Forcible rape, the cardinal knowledge, in parentheses sex, of a female forcibly and against her will, assaults or attempts to commit rape by force or a threat of force are also included. Number 3, we've got robbery, the taking or attempting to take anything of value from the care, custody, or control of a person or persons by force or threat of force or violence, and or by putting the victim in fear. Number 4, we've got aggravated assault, the unlawful attack by a person upon another for the purpose of inflicting severe or aggravated bodily injury. Number 5, which you should remember is different than numbers 3 up there, is burglary, the unlawful entry or attempted entry of a structure to commit a felony or theft. A felony is any offense punishable by death and imprisonment. Burglaries basically include no other person. There's no fear inflicted on whoever they're robbing a property versus robbing a person. They're taking from a person. So number 6 is larceny theft, the unlawful taking, carrying, leading, or riding away of property from the possession or constructive possession of another. Attempted larcenies are also included. Number 7 is motor vehicle theft, the theft or attempted theft of a motor vehicle. And lastly, number 8 is arson, any willful or malicious burning or attempted to burn with or without intent to defraud a dwelling, public building, motor vehicle or aircraft, personal property of another. Within this crime report, basically they have ages under 18 and then ages 18 or older, which gives law enforcement personnel and researchers using the FBI UCR vital information for data purposes. Within this section, we also have violent crimes versus property crimes. Violent crimes are basically the first 4 part 1 crimes, which are murder, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. Property crimes are the last 4, which is burglary, larceny, theft, motor vehicle, or arson. Using this, law enforcement and researchers are able to tell the number of juveniles that were arrested for a crime, but not the data on juvenile contact with police or when a juvenile was taken into custody for his own protection, as in cases of neglect. And then just for a quick note is that the UCR requires anyone underneath 18 as a juvenile. Status offenses are basically only against juveniles. They can only be implemented against juveniles. They include truancy, purchasing or consuming alcohol, knowingly associating with bad people, running away, being beyond parent control, or curfew violations. These vary place to place, which makes it kind of difficult to makes it difficult for the police to seem reliable when it comes to juveniles. They seem, juvenile status ordinances prior to 1965 resulted in a tremendous amount of incarcerated youth, but as of now, they have created more laws and things like that give juveniles the legal rights. But still, thousands of juveniles are arrested each year due to status offenses. And then lastly, we've got male and female involvement in juvenile delinquency. Essentially, males are seen to be more arrested more often than females, except in the cases of prostitution and running away from home. Juvenile arrests have gone down since 1998, despite what the media usually says. And then a study by McDonough's basically challenged the upsurge in female delinquency over the fact that it was due to the feminist movement, and she basically found that there was very little information or little connection between the two. And then we had Madette Chesney Lind and Randall G. Sheldon, who found that there was little change in female delinquency over the past 2 decades, but they found that there was change in girls' misbehavior in minor and traditional female offenses. Or they concluded that, only to be refuted by the FBI Uniform Crime Report since 1991. As stated in the chapter, females have been seen to be more active in crime that usually was dominated by males. Some say that's due to assertiveness, but Frida Alder, said that the phenomenon of female criminality is but one wave in this rising tide of female assertiveness, whereas Leon Salzman states that there is no biological reason to be less aggressive than males, except that being aggressive had no meaning in a woman's life until she had the same responsibilities as a man. Essentially saying that the only reason females are becoming more or being arrested more often is because they have the possibilities to be in more crimes as men. So, as a last note, crime is committed. Okay.
My name is Evelyn Benitez, and I'll be talking about the racial and ethnic factors in juvenile delinquency. Racial group refers to those minorities and corresponding majorities that are classified by physical differences such as skin color, facial features, hair color, and texture. There are at least 4 races represented in the United States population according to the United States Bureau of the Census Classification Scheme. These races include the whites, the blacks, the Asian Pacific Islanders, and the American Indians. The blacks, Asian Pacific Islanders, and the American Indians are numerically smaller than the whites and are considered racial minorities in the United States. Racial minorities do not always manifest the same level of delinquency as do members of the dominant racial group. For example, according to FBI crime reports, young blacks make up 15% of the juvenile population but account for more than one half of the arrests for violent offenses of people less than 18 years of age. These violent crimes include offenses of murder, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. However, white youths are more likely than blacks to be arrested for property crimes, which accounts for almost 2/3 of all property crimes for people less than 18 years of age. The number of arrests of young American Indians or Alaskan natives and Asian Pacific Islanders is very small compared to white and black populations. Criminologists found that statistics on juvenile delinquency vary with ethnicity as well. Data shows that Hispanic young people are accounted for a larger share of juvenile arrests than other ethnicities. Arrests have been higher in the large cities than in small cities or rural areas, which may indicate a greater sensitivity of law enforcement agencies and the public to the incidence of crime and delinquency in middle-class suburban districts. Youngsters living in both urban and suburban communities are very similar in the kinds of crimes they commit for which they are arrested. However, rural youths are more likely to be involved in less serious crimes. Juvenile court statistics. The National Juvenile Court Statistical Reporting Program was initiated in 1929 by the Children's Bureau, which released reports on cases of children processed through a sample of juvenile courts. Reports included juveniles who had violated state laws, as well as children who were dependent or neglected and who required special proceedings to determine custody or adoption, permission for medical treatment, and other miscellaneous conditions. Although law enforcement officers are the primary source of referral, cases of young people accused of violating the law can also be referred to juvenile court by social agencies, schools, parents, probation officers, and victims. For processing delinquency cases, juvenile courts operate a 2-track system. The track that is selected depends on the seriousness of the offense, the number of previous contacts the youth had had with the police, quality of evidence, and other variables. The court intake personnel can make a decision to divert the matter away from the court system. In most non-petition cases, the youth is released, often with a warning, and he/she may be referred to another agency for counseling, voluntary community service, or a restitution program to compensate victims. Serious delinquency cases are assigned to the formal track that begins with filing a petition. In a formal hearing, the court is asked to assume jurisdiction over the youth if a judgment of delinquent is reached. Final court disposition can involve a fine, restitution, probation, institutionalization, or a combination of these sanctions. Findings. Courts with juvenile jurisdiction formally process approximately 1.6 million cases of juvenile delinquency annually. Delinquency cases encompass juveniles charged with offenses against persons and property, as well as drug violations and public order offenses such as disorderly conduct and public drunkenness. Other status offenses such as running away, truancy, ungovernable behavior, and liquor law violations are also included in the total number of cases. Juvenile court statistics reveal that white youngsters account for 70-75% of all runaway, truancy, and ungovernable behavior cases processed, and about 2/3 of young people involved in juvenile courts are male. However, the number of delinquency cases involving females increase at a higher rate every year than those involving males.
The composite delinquent profile, typical or stereotypical. Juvenile delinquents reflect the higher incidence of unstable home life due to parental status. separation, divorce, desertion, or death. Statistics are high when it comes to juvenile delinquents living in urban lower class neighborhoods. Another connection also appears between the violent behavior of certain juveniles that have experienced any type of abuse or sexual violence within the family. These are the youths that are categorized as being at risk to become juvenile delinquents. Many juvenile delinquents also do not fall under the statistical model. Several studies have shown that although gender, social class, race, ethnicity, and family qualities have a lot to do with describing a juvenile, we must not assume that they all have the same traits and backgrounds. Limitations of official delinquency data. Arrest statistics. Several problems happen when it comes to the use of database on arrest. Low arrest rates can mean that there is low criminal activity, but it can also mean that the police force is not doing their job adequately, is inactive or ineffective in the area. High arrest rate can mean that there are high levels of criminal activity in the area, or can mean that the police are just making arrests to publicize themselves. The dark figure of crime and delinquency. Many crimes also go unreported. Victims sometimes fail to report assaults and deaths because of the fear that police will do nothing for them, and also private matters. Juveniles often get into fights but do not realize that if they are caught, they can get arrested because it is something that isn't brought to anyone's attention. Also, teenage shoplifting, it does not become a matter of concern because it is not as serious as a serious incident. Juveniles are confronted daily by different types of authority figures and are given informal warnings, censures, and punishments.
Hi guys, my name is Chris and I'll be talking about textbook 1 chapter 2. So, unofficial sources of delinquent information. So to begin, many researchers want to find out delinquent behavior, but sometimes rather not use official reports of arrests and court dispositions to draw their sample. So they just get a population and interview and survey them. They believe this method is designed to review undetected and unreported instances of delinquent behavior in official reports. So we move on to the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth 1997. And when this took place, the first wave of 9,000 youth were between the ages of 12 to 16 at the end of the year of 1996. And this survey asked teenagers in what delinquent behavior they engaged in order to predict future delinquency. The results concluded that 1 in 7 12-year-olds had engaged in assaultive behavior, and 1 in 4 purposely destroyed property. So this organization continued, and in 44,000 youths in 31 countries showed higher rates of delinquent behavior that was even reported. So self-reported studies in the United States and other parts of the world showed that delinquent behavior is more common than indicated by official data. In a self-report study between 2 universities in regards to delinquent behavior, it demonstrated that 625 subjects shoplifted, and these 625 subjects were predominantly white. So, aside from shoplifting, many of them caused property damage and inflicted pain on others, and they also took cars without permission. So, out of all these delinquent acts, less than 5% of the subjects were arrested for any reason under the age of 18. So, with these self-reports, there are many critics that you might lie and say, "Oh no, like in order to make yourself look better, you might lie about the stuff that you actually did, and vice versa. You might exaggerate your delinquent behavior, so the study might not be accurate." But other than that, Michael Hindley and his association found that studies that use official records and those utilizing self-report surveys typically have measured different types of behaviors. He also stated that official reports and self-reports provide characteristics of offenders.
Victimization surveys are conducted by the U.S. Department of Justice and some private researchers. These surveys focus on victims and their recollection of the crime. They can be asked about variables such as the perpetrator's age, sex, or race, or questions such as how many assailants there were, or specific conditions in which the crime occurred. One of the biggest victimization surveys is the National Crime Victimization Survey, or the NCVS. It was started in 1973 by the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration of the Department of Justice. It measures the victims who are 12 and older who were victims of rape, robbery, larceny, burglary, and motor vehicle theft. The NCVS helps uncover more crimes because they are all answered anonymously. Because many crimes such as rape go unreported, the victim can openly report on the crime without the embarrassment or the hassle of dealing with the procedures of law enforcement. Alongside revealing unreported crimes, the NCVS also reveals new information. Due to the results of the survey, researchers have determined that teenagers are twice as likely to be a victim of violent crime. Despite the positive aspects of the NCVS, it does face some limitations. Since the victims are the only source of information, and since the survey is answered anonymously, the data that the researchers collect may not always be 100% accurate. The victims may not be completely honest, or what they believe happened may not in fact be the truth. So inaccurate data can lead to invalid results. Another criticism is the many serious crimes that are excluded, such as kidnapping, drugs, murder, and driving under the influence. The magnitude and trends of juvenile delinquency are very difficult to accurately understand because juveniles have a disproportionate share of the national crime problem. Also, lots of official and unofficial data have different results. In the decade between 2000 and 2009, youth crime did decrease in violent crimes, property offenses, rape, motor vehicle theft, and arson. Various sources have been credited with the decline in juvenile crime. These sources include active law enforcement and after-school social programs who direct their attention towards adolescents. Despite the slight decline, juvenile delinquency still remains a huge problem in the U.S., with robbery having an increased rate of 18% and over 1.5 million people under the age of 18 being arrested each year. Juvenile delinquency still proves to be a major problem in the U.S.
The first 8 UCR categories are as follows. 1. Murder and non-negligent manslaughter. 2. Forcible rape. 3. Robbery. 4. Aggravated assault. 5. Burglary. 6. Larceny theft. 7. Motor vehicle theft. 8. Arson. Because of the crime's seriousness, how often these crimes occur, and the likelihood of the crimes being reported to the police, these 8 crime categories were chosen as the basis for the Uniform Crime Report Index. The index is useful for charting and analyzing changes in the volume of crime in its various and most serious forms from year to year. The Uniform Crime Report program categorizes a juvenile to be an individual under 18 years old, regardless of how states' definitions may differ. The first 4 index offenses, murder, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, are categorized as violent crimes. These are known for being acted out against an individual. The last 4 index offenses, burglary, larceny theft, motor vehicle theft, and arson, are categorized as property crimes. These crimes are typically nonviolent and are acted out on property. The offenses by juveniles under 18 years old for the first 8 crime categories in 2010 are as follows. Murder and non-negligent manslaughter was 784 juveniles. Forcible rape was 2,198 juveniles. Robbery was 3,936 juveniles. Aggravated assault was 35,001 juvenile. Burglary, 51,298 juveniles. Larceny theft, 223,207 juveniles. Motor vehicle theft was 12,268 juveniles. And arson was 3,578 juveniles. A limitation of the UCR program is even though the data can be found instantaneously available on the internet and the most recent UCR data is usually a minimum of 1 year behind. A major strength of the Uniform Crime Reporting Program is that standardized definitions of the main 8 crime categories are used by all law enforcement agencies reporting from various states. This is why the annual FBI compilations are called Uniform Crime Reports.